All right, so the title here seems kind of hyperbolic, I guess, but it's not even really clickbait, actually, because Kotaku kind of sort of just literally died. And maybe the website will continue to function on a basic level and be profitable, perhaps, but the way it is right now, that's over. And oddly enough, I actually have a pretty unique individual perspective on why. Here's a basic rundown before I go in depth on what precisely this means for the website. March 21st, which is yesterday as of me scripting this, Jen Glennon, editor in chief at Kotaku at the time, abruptly resigned. Jen Glennon has a lengthy history working in the world of media. I really don't know much about her, so good at her job, bad at her job, I honestly can't say. But this abrupt and unexplained decision quickly received context. See, Kotaku writers began losing their collective minds. I'll take a minute right now to clarify that's very understandable. Losing your job is not an easy thing, especially when you've sunk months or years into building your position at a certain company. We should all be able to sympathize and have some empathy here. That's not something to celebrate at all. And while those writers have not actually lost their job currently, they're probably going to. I'll explain that in a minute here. So Jen Glennon resigns abruptly, and then both current and former staff at Kotaku start spilling the beans that GNO Media has redefined the entire website content direction to focus now almost exclusively on gaming guides, not activism-based editorial pieces or politically laced op-eds. And they also implemented a quota of 50 guides per week, allegedly. That news is getting very mixed reception right now. I've seen everything from good, that's a better direction, GNO Media is a genius for doing this, all the way to get woke, go broke, and even the sky is falling, who's going to tell the gamer chuds how wrong they are now? Ask different people about this, and you'll get completely different answers, because perspective here seems to be fully dependent on whether or not someone liked the individual politics of the Kotaku writers. There was a singular political slant at that outlet for many years, which is completely indisputable. And that simple litmus test will basically tell you whether or not someone is now celebrating all this or panicking over the decision by GNO Media to change the website's direction. Here's the fun part. It turns out, if you don't believe me, I'm about to show proof of everything I'm saying. It turns out I'm actually uniquely qualified to speak on this topic and also have literal years of data to back up what I'm about to say. See, originally, way back when the channel first got started, in the early days, all I did was make video game guides. I started with The Division, nearly killed the channel outright when I tried to expand, but eventually I was producing guides for basically every single popular game release that happened. Destiny 2, Red Dead Redemption, even Fallout 76. Cyberpunk, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Assassin's Creed, Borderlands 2, even more recently Elden Ring. I went from guides in one game to guides in any game, and I have the data now because of that to properly evaluate this whole situation. If you listen to a political activism-oriented gaming journalist right now, the sky is actually falling on their head. This decision is the worst thing in the world. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's a completely idiotic thing to do. How could they ever think that an audience would go there for gaming guides to Kotaku? And it's an obvious blunder by GNO Media that can't be allowed to persist unchecked. However, as someone with close to a decade of YouTube experience, tens of millions of views attracted through the production of gaming guides in particular, and all the data at my disposal, at my fingertips to demonstrate this, let's take a look at the reality of the situation. Not the blind celebration, by the way, because someone thinks the writers they politically disagree with are going to lose their jobs, which they probably are. And not the brain dead outrage because a company made a calculated fiscal decision to step away from antagonistic, politically motivated content. Let's look at what's really happening, okay? Like the actual down to earth reality, not one side or the other of an extreme. Here goes. Gaming guides are absolutely a viable genre of content, and here's a few examples. This is a 5-minute, 50-second video I did for Red Dead Redemption 2. It is incredibly simple and merely showcases the location of 5 pieces of writing, I think, from back then, explaining how if you go to all these spots, you can hunt an NPC that pretends to be a vampire. This took me less than 1 hour to make and has garnered well over 1 million views since originally published. In the past 365 days, so 1 year, it's gotten 200,000 views, and this means that less than 1 hour of work 6 years ago is still producing reliable viewership, subscribers, and revenue today. That's basically the holy grail of content creation. It's called evergreen, and it holds true regardless of medium, because articles with written content can do precisely the same thing, sometimes even better. Well, some of you might be thinking, but Red Dead Redemption 2 is a crazy high-profile release that doesn't happen every day, so it's not a repeatable thing. And you'd be right, except for the part where you're completely wrong. See, that pattern is actually easy to replicate if you are able to quickly target new games and produce at least passably helpful content. Here's a tips video for a video game called Frostpunk. Incredible game. It's about to get a sequel, actually, which is exciting. But it's nowhere near as popular as Red Dead Redemption 2. Still, a simple 5 tips and tricks video I produced, also about 6 years ago, has continued to garner viewership this entire time, collectively reaching over 250,000 people and serving as evergreen content with drip-fed income and subscriber growth. See, this pattern is actually the norm. I did very few guides for Monster Hunter World when it initially came out, but when I did, things like this happened. How to get Zora Magdaros gems and armor. And this content is extremely simplistic, mind you. Merely explaining how to get one resource with one method in a popular video game, right? It's really simple. Hundreds of thousands of views, hundreds of dollars, consistent subscriber growth. Let me just rapid fire these. Again, I have a lot of examples to draw from. Top 5 tips for Cyberpunk, million views, evergreen. Tips for Borderlands, evergreen, less than 400,000 views, made me $2,000 over 4 years. Tips for Red Dead 2, still going. Fishing guide for Red Dead 2, still going. Tips for Bannerlord, still going strong, evergreen. Tips for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which isn't even the most recent game in the series anymore as well. Consistent viewership, thousands of dollars over the span of years. Even a game like Kingdom Come Deliverance, Best Gear, an alchemy guide, and a money-making video, among others, all continuing to gain viewership even now consistently as they grow the channel and earn me money well after the fact. The list goes on. This is really just a snapshot. I have a ton more data at my disposal to prove this, but I'm just trying to condense it as much as I can. But the point is to demonstrate here that guide content is a consistent and reliable method of attracting viewership, even more than half a decade after whatever game it is initially came out, while the channel has completely changed direction since then as well. See, I've done the grind where you produce guides, and I've also done the more journalistic thing, I guess, where I publish my opinions about games or topics instead of giving information on them, even though that still does often contain a lot of information, but still. I can tell you with no shadow of a doubt here, possessing all the data necessary to prove my point, the video game guide content is much more consistently profitable than op-eds or think pieces or whatever the fuck Kotaku writers have been doing for the past few years. To be clear, the more highbrow journalistic stuff certainly can be a hit, sometimes, periodically. I have videos that do exceptionally well that discuss things like TikTok and social media, AI, general technology, and more. But video game guides, and I say this as an indisputable expert on the subject, are an extremely reliable source of viewership if you can produce them quickly and if you can properly fill them with information. This decision by G&O Media is not some misguided blunder, regardless of what these writers are screaming about on Twitter. This is not some horribly ill-informed mistake. This is a viable business decision that can absolutely result in high-paying, consistent traffic with low effort and a lot of frequency. Extremely reliable profits, really, for Kotaku, if it's executed properly. I don't know if it will be executed properly, but as a basic foundation, it's a viable strategy. However, and this is a big however here, that doesn't mean that the whole situation is good, and it doesn't mean I'm sitting here happy. See, part of the shift is requiring 50 guides per week from each of their staff writers. And yes, I know my audience dislikes Kotaku and their writers significantly, but let's keep our feet firmly on the ground here and not lose track of reality simply because we disagree with them. 50 guides per week? That's just untenable. That's completely impossible to do and effectively forces them to plagiarize. See, guide content success is directly proportional to its speed and its relative information. You have to be quick, and you have to put things in that players genuinely want to know but don't already know. Do that and you're golden, but you cannot possibly do that yourself, at least not properly, 50 times per week, because there's a lot more that goes into it, right? You actually have to spend the time to find the information to put in there, or you have to plagiarize it. So like they're basically being forced to plagiarize with that criteria. It basically means that writers will be forced to take information that exists already from other outlets, which I guess was kind of insinuated by G&O Media already, like the aggregation side of things. They would regurgitate things that exist elsewhere, which depletes the value of that article and the article it's based on already. Or stretch out what they find into multiple articles instead of one highly packed, information-dense write-up, which more than likely destroys the potential for this shift to actually help Kotaku from a business perspective and makes this whole thing a lot more likely to fail. See, my guess, and it's a fairly accurate guess here based on context, at least in my opinion, this is an excuse to fire everyone. The fundamental business decision to shift over and focus on guides is valid, and do not let a single journalist tell you it's not. They simply don't know what they're talking about here, or their critical thinking is obviously clouded by anger right now. However, Requiring 50 guides per week is not valid, and the only actual purpose of that would be to overwhelm the writers to a point where they can't keep up and then, I guess, fire them. That, in my view, is extremely stupid. I know some people will celebrate this and say they're getting what they deserve, and I understand that mentality, but guys, jacking up the requirements of a job to be impossible just so you have an excuse to end someone's employment is like super fucked up. We can disagree with someone politically and still acknowledge when they get completely shafted by a greedy company, so I hope that everyone watching is able to make that distinction here and now. It is completely valid to shift Kotaku in the direction of gaming guides. These whining, screeching journalists don't have a leg to stand on disputing the validity of that decision. But requiring them to basically plagiarize or produce horrible content just to keep up with that quota, that is idiotic. It really is. And either means that the company is screwing them over on purpose or making a serious blunder when it comes to content pacing. My guess, they're creating a reason to fire people as they execute this shift, but with two sides hell-bent on proving the other side wrong, it felt like a good idea to look at the situation and calmly explain that both sides are in fact wrong. The journalists are completely full of shit in their complaints about the basic decision making. This is a valid and potentially highly profitable shift to make. But the weekly requirements really are a complete disaster in their current form and should not be defended as a great move to salvage the sinking ship. Kotaku just died, not as a general publication necessarily, but as an avatar of let me push my ideologically driven opinions on you ignorant viewers, which was the consistent atmosphere it managed to cultivate for years, right? That's what Kotaku was. It was all the gamers suck and our audience are losers and idiots and look how wrong they are and this is what you should think and this is what I think. So like it was so, I don't know, it was so politically driven and it came through in every aspect of their writing. That seems to be legitimately dead as their parent company shifts in a new but completely understandable direction, even if the requirements they've implemented while doing so are extremely bad and will probably, if left in place, make the whole thing fail. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have a channel merchandise line that's open till April 10th. After that, the spring collection will be gone, so get that while it's still there. Locals and Patreon, monthly subscriptions, a VPN deal, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.